A woman who fled communist Russia built a philosophy that would reshape American capitalism, inspire generations of entrepreneurs, and ignite debates that still rage today. Her ideas would be praised by CEOs and condemned by critics as dangerous. She would become one of the most influential and polarizing thinkers of the 20th century. Her name was Ayn Rand, and she never apologized for anything. February 2nd, 1905, St. Petersburg, Russia. In a Jewish family's apartment, a girl is born who will one day argue that selfishness is a virtue and altruism a poison. The child's parents named her Alisa Zinovievna Rosenbaum. Her father, Zinovy, owned a successful pharmacy. Her mother, Anna, came from a wealthy family and held firm ideas about proper behaviour and social status. They had money, education, and a place in the professional class of Tsarist Russia. For a Jewish family in early 20th century Russia, this was no small achievement. Little Alisa was not an easy child. She was serious, intense, and preferred books to people from the moment she could read. At age 6, she decided she would become a writer. Not hoped, not dreamed, decided. This wasn't a passing fancy. She began inventing stories immediately, creating elaborate adventures, featuring heroic figures who conquered obstacles through sheer force of will. Her younger sisters, Natasha and Nora, were softer, more conventional. Alisa stood apart. She questioned everything. She argued. She demanded logical consistency from adults who weren't accustomed to providing it. Her mother found her difficult, too intellectual, too unwilling to simply accept things as they were. The Rosenbaum apartment had a balcony overlooking Nevsky Prospect, St. Petersburg's Grand Boulevard. Alisa would stand there watching the crowds below, the carriages, the bustle of imperial Russia's capital. She was observing, analysing, forming opinions about human nature that would later harden into absolute certainty. School came easily to her. Mathematics, literature, languages. She absorbed everything with fierce concentration. But she didn't make friends. Other children bored her. They played games she found pointless. They accepted authority she questioned. They seemed content with mediocrity. At 9, she discovered her first literary hero. A French adventure series called The Mysterious Valley featured a British officer named Cyrus Paltons. He was everything she admired. Purposeful, competent, supremely self-assured. He didn't doubt himself. He didn't apologize. He simply acted, and the world bent to his will. This was the template. Every hero she would later create would carry echoes of Cyrus Paltons. Then came 1914. The Great War exploded across Europe, and even in distant St. Petersburg, everything began to change. Zinovy's pharmacy continued operating, but the atmosphere darkened. Shortages appeared. Prices climbed. The Tsar's government seemed increasingly disconnected from reality. Alisa was 10 years old, watching her world prepare to collapse. By 1917, Russia was starving. The Tsar's armies were bleeding to death on distant fronts. In Petrograd, as St. Petersburg was now called, bread lines stretched for blocks. The professional classes that had provided stability were being crushed between aristocratic incompetence above and revolutionary rage below. February 1917. The Russian Revolution begins not as a planned uprising, but as spontaneous riots over bread. Within days, the 300-year-old Romanov dynasty crumbles. Tsar Nicholas abdicates. A provisional government takes control, promising democracy and reform. 12-year-old Alisa watches from that same balcony on Nevsky Prospect as history accelerates. Soldiers march past, crowds gather, speeches are shouted. Her father's pharmacy remains open, but the future has become uncertain. For a few months, there's hope. Perhaps Russia will become a Western-style democracy. Perhaps the war will end. Perhaps normalcy will return. It doesn't. October 1917. Vladimir Lenin and his Bolsheviks seize power in a swift, almost bloodless coup. They promise peace, land, and bread. They deliver something entirely different. The Bolsheviks begin nationalizing private property. Banks, factories, businesses, all of it seized in the name of the people. One day, Red Guards appear at Zinovy Rosenbaum's pharmacy. It no longer belongs to him. It belongs to the state. The family's primary source of income vanishes with the stroke of a bureaucrat's pen. This moment brands itself into Elisa's consciousness. Her father had built something through years of work. Men with guns took it because they claimed a greater right to it. This wasn't taxation. This wasn't regulation. This was theft, justified by ideology. The Rosenbaum family's status collapses overnight. They're no longer prosperous. They're now class enemies, bourgeois parasites in the new socialist paradise. The apartment on Nevsky Prospect becomes cramped as conditions deteriorate. Food grows scarce. Electricity becomes unreliable. The civilization Elisa had known simply stops functioning. Civil war erupts. The Reds against the Whites, Bolsheviks against everyone else. Russia tears itself apart in an orgy of violence that will claim millions of lives. Petrograd, caught between warring armies, endures hunger, cold, and terror. Elisa is 13, 14, 15. The years blur into a nightmare of deprivation. She watches people starve. She watches the new regime execute its enemies. She watches ideology destroy everything her family had worked to build. And she draws conclusions that will never change. The Bolsheviks speak constantly of collective good, of sacrifice for the masses, of the glory of selflessness. Elisa sees something different. She sees mediocrity elevated, competence punished, achievement condemned as exploitation. She sees that when you make need the standard of value, you create a society where the able are chained to the unable, where productivity is a crime, where the only way to survive is to have nothing worth taking. In 1918, desperate to escape Petrograd's chaos, the Rosenbaums flee south to the Crimea, still held by white forces. For a brief time, life approaches normalcy. Elisa attends school. She continues reading, writing, thinking. But the Red Army is advancing, and everyone knows what's coming. The Whites lose, the Reds win. The Bolsheviks consolidate power across all of Russia. There will be no democratic alternative. There will be no restoration of the old order. This is the new reality. A society where individual rights mean nothing, where the collective is everything, where the state owns not just your property but your life. By 1921, the Rosenbaums return to Petrograd. The civil war is over. The Bolsheviks have won. But victory hasn't brought prosperity. The city is a ghost of its former self. Buildings are crumbling. Services barely function. People survive on rations that leave them perpetually hungry. Elisa enrolls at Petrograd State University. She studies philosophy and history, diving into the ideas that shape societies. She reads Aristotle, Nietzsche, the Russian philosophers. She's looking for answers to questions that torment her. Why did this happen? How could civilization collapse so completely? What makes a society free or enslaved? The university is now a Soviet institution, saturated with Marxist ideology. Professors teach that individualism is a bourgeois delusion, that history is driven by class struggle, that the collective will of the workers represents the highest morality. Elisa listens to all of this and concludes that it's not just wrong, but evil. She keeps these conclusions to herself. Speaking against the regime is dangerous. People disappear for saying less than what she thinks. So she stays quiet, studies and plans. Because Elisa Rosenbaum has decided something else. She will leave Russia. She will go to America. And she will expose the philosophy that destroyed her country for what it truly is. But getting out of Soviet Russia isn't simple. The borders are sealed. Citizens need permission to travel. and permission is rarely granted. She needs a reason, a justification the authorities will accept. She finds one in an unexpected place: family. Her mother's relatives had emigrated to America years before the Revolution. They live in Chicago. In 1925, Elisa applies for a visa to visit them, claiming it's a temporary trip to see family. The application sits for months. She waits, knowing that rejection means staying trapped in the Soviet Union forever. Then, improbably, approval comes through. Perhaps the bureaucrats don't see her as a threat. Perhaps they're simply careless. Whatever the reason, 20-year-old Elisa Rosenbaum receives permission to leave the country for 6 months. She knows she's never coming back. January 1926, Elisa boards a train heading west. She crosses the border into Latvia, then continues to Berlin, then to Paris. Every mile takes her further from the prison that Russia has become. In Paris, she boards a ship bound for New York. The Atlantic crossing takes 2 weeks. She stands on deck, watching the horizon, barely able to contain the energy building inside her. She's escaping. She's free. And she has plans that will take decades to fulfill. When the ship passes the Statue of Liberty and enters New York Harbor, Elisa Rosenbaum sees America for the first time. She will later describe this moment as among the most important of her life. Here was a country built on different principles: individual rights, limited government, the idea that you could make something of yourself through your own effort, that success wasn't something to apologize for, that your life belonged to you and nobody else. She had arrived at the place where she could finally become who she was meant to be. The customs official asks her name. She gives it: Elisa Rosenbaum. He waves her through. She steps onto American soil with a few dollars, minimal English, and absolute certainty about her purpose. Her relatives in Chicago welcome her. They help her settle in, find her feet, but Chicago isn't where she wants to be. She's not interested in living a conventional immigrant life, working ordinary jobs, blending into a community. She came to America to do something specific: tell stories that would show the world why individualism matters and collectivism destroys. She needs to get to Hollywood. In 1926, Hollywood is the dream factory of the world, churning out movies that audiences everywhere devour. If you want to reach millions of people with your ideas, film is the medium. Elisa knows this. She also knows she needs a new name. Elisa Rosenbaum sounds too Russian, too Jewish, too foreign. She needs something that will work in America, something that sounds like it belongs. She chooses Ayn, possibly from a Finnish writer she admired, though the origin remains disputed. For a surname, she picks Rand, perhaps from her typewriter, a Remington Rand. Ayn Rand, the name fits. It's distinctive, memorable, vaguely exotic but not foreign. The woman who will build an entire philosophy around identity has invented her own. She tells her Chicago relatives she's going to California to break into the movie business. They think she's being impractical. She doesn't care what they think. In late 1926, Ayn Rand boards another train, this one heading west across the American continent toward Los Angeles. She has almost no money, knows almost no one, and has no connections in the film industry. What she has is will, pure, uncompromising, absolute will. The train carries her across the Midwest, across the plains, across the mountains. She watches America scroll past the windows, vast, rich, full of possibility. This is the country that will let her succeed or fail based on her own abilities. This is the country that won't punish achievement or redistribute success. This is where Ayn Rand will build her philosophy and her legend. The train pulls into Los Angeles in early 1927. Ayn Rand steps onto the platform with a single suitcase and an address scribbled on a piece of paper. The relatives who agreed to take her in live in a modest neighborhood far from the studios. She stays with them just long enough to get her bearings. Within days, she's scouring the city for opportunities. She visits studio gates, asks questions, learns how the system works. Breaking into Hollywood in 1926 is nearly impossible for someone with her background. She's a foreigner, a woman, and she has no industry experience. The studios are closed worlds, controlled by a handful of powerful men who hire from within their networks. But Rand has something most aspiring writers don't: an actual plan. She's not just hoping to get lucky. She studied the industry from afar, read everything she could find about how American movies are made. She knows she needs to start somewhere, anywhere, and work her way up. The break comes from an unexpected direction. She's walking near the studios one morning when she sees a man standing on the street corner. He's tall, distinctive looking, clearly someone important. She doesn't know who he is, but she approaches him anyway. She asks if he works in films. He does. He's Cecil B. DeMille, one of the most powerful directors in Hollywood. This moment has become part of Rand's mythology. Different versions exist. In her telling, she was bold, direct, explained that she'd come from Russia to write for American cinema. DeMille was intrigued by this intense young woman with the thick accent and the burning ambition. He offered her work as an extra on his current production, The King of Kings. Whether the encounter happened exactly as Rand later described is unknowable. What matters is the result. She gets onto a DeMille set. She's inside the system. Working as an extra pays almost nothing, but it puts her in proximity to the machinery of film production. She watches, she learns, she observes how scenes are constructed, how scripts translate into images, how the technical aspects of movie making function. On set, she meets a young actor named Frank O'Connor. He's working as an extra too, a handsome man with dark hair and a quiet manner. She notices him immediately. He notices her. The attraction is instant and mutual. They begin talking between takes. He's charmed by her intensity, by the way she speaks about ideas with such seriousness. She's attracted to his looks, certainly, but also to something else. He seems strong, self-contained, not threatened by her ambition. He doesn't try to diminish her or redirect her energy into more conventional channels. They marry in 1929. The wedding is small, practical. Rand needs legal status in America, and marriage to an American citizen solves that problem. But it's more than convenience. She genuinely cares for Frank. He becomes her partner, her support system, the person who makes it possible for her to focus entirely on her work. Frank O'Connor will spend the rest of his life in Ayn Rand's shadow. He'll give up his own modest acting career. He'll manage their household, handle practical matters, and provide emotional stability while she pursues her vision with single-minded intensity. Later, critics will question the dynamic, call it unequal, suggest that Rand dominated him unfairly. But by all accounts, Frank chose this role willingly. He believed in her work. He wanted to help her succeed. With her immigration status secure, Rand throws herself into writing. She's working on multiple projects simultaneously. Original screenplays, stage plays, anything that might sell. Her English is improving rapidly, though she'll never lose the accent or certain grammatical quirks. Her style is developing too, becoming more confident, more distinctly hers. She writes a screenplay called Red Pawn, set in Soviet Russia. It's a thriller involving a woman who infiltrates a forced labor camp to rescue her husband. The script sells to Universal Studios in 1932. It's her first major success, proof that she can compete in the American market. The sale brings money, validation, and momentum. She's not just a hopeful immigrant anymore. She's a working screenwriter. Universal pays her $1,500 for the script, a substantial sum during the Depression. They never produced the film, but that doesn't matter. She's broken through. She starts working on a novel. This is where her real ambitions lie. Film is a means to an end, a way to support herself while she develops the ideas that matter most. But novels are where she can fully control the narrative, where she can explore philosophy without the constraints of collaborative filmmaking. The novel she begins writing is called We the Living. It's set in Soviet Russia, drawing directly from her own experiences. The protagonist is a young woman named Kira Argunova, who struggles to maintain her individuality and her right to her own life in a society that demands complete submission to the collective. Writing in English is still difficult. She works slowly, revising extensively, fighting to express complex ideas in a language she's only recently acquired. But the voice emerging on the page is powerful. Her prose is direct, almost stark, with none of the literary flourishes popular in 1930s fiction. She's writing the way she thinks, clearly, logically, without apology. The manuscript takes years to complete. She works on it while also writing screenplays and stage plays to pay the bills. Frank supports them with whatever work he can find during the Depression years. Money is tight, but they manage. In 1933, Rand finishes a stage play called Night of January 16th. It's a courtroom drama with an innovative twist. The jury is selected from the audience each night, and their verdict determines the ending. The play is a hit. It opens in Los Angeles, then moves to Broadway in 1935, running for months. Suddenly, Ayn Rand has a successful Broadway play. Critics praise its originality and theatrical effectiveness. Audiences love the interactive element. She's becoming known, building a reputation. The woman who arrived in America 7 years earlier with nothing has established herself as a professional writer. She finishes We the Living in 1935. Finding a publisher proves difficult. The book is long, dark, set in a country most Americans know nothing about. Publishers worry it won't sell. The political climate is complicated too. Many American intellectuals in the 1930s are sympathetic to socialism, seeing it as a progressive alternative to capitalism during the Depression. A novel that portrays Soviet Russia as a nightmare of oppression and death doesn't fit the mood. Macmillan finally publishes We the Living in 1936. The reviews are mixed. Some critics recognize its power and authenticity. Others dismiss it as propaganda or find it too bleak. Sales are modest. The book doesn't make her famous or wealthy. But something important happens. The people who read We the Living and connect with it become devoted readers. They see something in Rand's writing that speaks to them directly, something missing from other literature. She's articulating ideas about individualism and freedom that feel urgent and necessary, especially as totalitarian movements spread across Europe. Rand starts receiving letters from readers. They tell her the book changed their thinking, opened their eyes, gave them language for ideas they'd felt but couldn't express. These early readers become the nucleus of what will eventually grow into a movement. She begins work on her next novel immediately. This one will be different. We the Living was based on her Russian experiences, drawn from memory and pain. The new book will be set in America, and it will explore the conflict she sees emerging between individualism and collectivism in her adopted country. She calls it the Fountainhead. The protagonist is an architect named Howard Rourke, who refuses to compromise his vision, who would rather work in a granite quarry than design buildings that violate his artistic principles. He represents everything Rand values: integrity, independence, creative genius, the willingness to stand alone against the collective. The antagonist is Ellsworth Toohey, an architecture critic and socialist intellectual who uses his influence to promote mediocrity and destroy genuine achievement. He represents everything Rand despises: the second-hander who lives through others, the man who preaches selflessness while accumulating power, the intellectual who uses egalitarian rhetoric to mask his will to dominate. Writing the Fountainhead consumes her. She works obsessively, often writing late into the night. Frank brings her meals at her desk. She barely notices. She's constructing something larger than a novel. She's building the foundation of a philosophical system, using fiction to demonstrate how her ideas work in practice. The research is extensive. She studies architecture, visits construction sites, reads everything she can find about building design and engineering. She interviews architects, takes notes on their creative processes, their struggles with clients and critics. She wants every detail to be accurate, every technical aspect credible. But the real work is philosophical. Each character represents a position in her intellectual framework. Each scene is designed to illustrate a principle. The plot is carefully constructed to demonstrate her thesis that the creator who produces value is society's greatest asset, and that the parasites who live off his work are its destroyers. She writes and rewrites. Sections that don't serve her philosophical purpose are cut, no matter how well written. Characters who don't advance her argument are eliminated. She's ruthless with her own work, demanding that every element contribute to the whole. The manuscript grows to enormous length, eventually reaching over 750 pages. She doesn't care about commercial considerations or publishing conventions. She's writing the book she needs to write, the way it needs to be written. By 1943, she's been working on The Fountainhead for 6 years. The manuscript has been rejected by 12 publishers. They all say the same things. Too long, too intellectual, too philosophical. They don't think anyone wants to read a novel about an architect who refuses to compromise. They suggest she cut it in half, simplify the ideas, make the protagonist more likable. She refuses every suggestion. The book is what it is. If no one will publish it as written, then no one will publish it at all. She's not interested in watering down her vision to satisfy publishers' assumptions about what readers want. Bobbs Merrill finally takes the chance. They published The Fountainhead in 1943, during the height of World War II. Initial sales are slow, reviews are polarized. Some critics call it brilliant, original, the work of a major new voice in American fiction. Others savage it, calling it overlong, preachy, populated by unrealistic characters who exist only to illustrate ideas. But readers discover it, word spreads, sales begin climbing. The book stays in print, keeps selling, finds its audience week by week, month by month. By 1945, it's a bestseller. By the end of the decade, it sold hundreds of thousands of copies. Something remarkable is happening. The Fountainhead is becoming more than a successful novel. It's becoming a phenomenon. Young people especially are responding to it with unusual intensity. They're reading it multiple times, discussing it endlessly, treating it like a revelation rather than entertainment. Rand is receiving thousands of letters now. Readers tell her the book changed their lives, gave them permission to value their own judgment, showed them that self-interest isn't evil. Many say they'd felt alone in their thinking until they read her work. She's articulated a philosophy that resonates with people who'd been searching for exactly this kind of defense of individualism. The success transforms her life. Money flows in. She can focus entirely on writing without financial worry. Hollywood wants to adapt The Fountainhead into a film. Warner Brothers buys the rights, and Rand insists on writing the screenplay herself. They agree. She moves back to California to work on the screenplay. Frank comes with her, as he always does. They rent a house in the San Fernando Valley. She meets with studio executives, works with directors, negotiates to maintain control over her material. The film version of The Fountainhead is released in 1949, starring Gary Cooper as Howard Rourke and Patricia Neal as Dominique Françon. The adaptation is controversial. Some find it powerful and uncompromising. Others call it heavy-handed propaganda. But it brings Rand's ideas to millions more people who would never read the novel. She's famous now, truly famous. The Fountainhead has made her a significant cultural figure, someone whose ideas are debated in universities and living rooms across America. She's invited to speak, to write articles, to explain her philosophy in interviews and lectures. But Ayn Rand isn't satisfied with fame or commercial success. She's been developing something more systematic, more comprehensive than anything she's expressed in fiction. She's ready to articulate her philosophy completely, to lay out every premise and every implication. She calls it Objectivism. The name is deliberate. Reality exists independently of consciousness. Objects are what they are regardless of anyone's feelings about them. 2 + 2 = 4, whether you like it or not. A is A. Existence exists. These aren't negotiable truths. They're axioms, self-evident facts that form the foundation of everything else. From there, she builds an entire system. Reason is the only means of knowledge. Faith, intuition, revelation, these aren't paths to truth. They're surrenders to irrationality. Emotions aren't tools of cognition. You don't discover what's real by consulting your feelings. You think, you observe, you deduce, you prove. Individual rights are absolute. No collective has the authority to sacrifice any person for the supposed good of others. Your life belongs to you. Your mind belongs to you. Your productive work belongs to you. Government's only legitimate function is protecting these rights, nothing more. No redistribution, no forced altruism, no obligation to live for anyone except yourself. Selfishness is virtue. Rand doesn't mean the petty, destructive behaviour most people associate with the word. She means rational self-interest, the pursuit of your own happiness through productive achievement. You're not a sacrificial animal. You're not here to serve others. You're here to live your own life, according to your own values. Anyone who tells you otherwise is trying to enslave you. Capitalism is the only moral system because it's the only system based on voluntary exchange. No coercion, no theft, no force. You trade value for value. You earn what you get. You get what you earn. Every other economic system requires some people to sacrifice for others, which means it requires force, which means it's immoral. This is what she's been working toward her entire life. Not just novels, not just stories about heroic individuals, but a complete philosophical framework that explains everything from metaphysics to politics in one integrated structure. She begins hosting weekly gatherings at her apartment in New York. A group of young intellectuals who've been drawn to her work start attending regularly. They call themselves the Collective, half-jokingly, because they're anything but collectivists. They meet on Saturday nights. Rand sits in her designated chair, cigarette in holder, presiding over discussions that sometimes last until dawn. One of the earliest members is a young man named Nathan Blumenthal. He's 20 years old when he first meets Rand in 1950, a psychology student at UCLA. He's read The Fountainhead 3 times and written her a letter about how profoundly it affected him. She invites him to visit when he's in New York. He shows up at her apartment, expecting a brief conversation. She talks to him for hours, challenging every assumption, testing his understanding of her ideas, probing to see if he truly grasps what she's saying. He does. Or at least he convinces her he does. She recognizes something in him, an intellectual intensity that matches her own. He's brilliant, passionate about ideas, devoted to her philosophy. He becomes part of the inner circle immediately. Nathan brings his girlfriend, Barbara Weidman. She's also captivated by Rand's work. She's studying philosophy, wants to understand Objectivism completely, wants to learn directly from its creator. Rand accepts her into the group as well. Others join. Leonard Peikoff, a philosophy student who will eventually become Rand's official intellectual heir. Alan Greenspan, an economist who's building a consulting practice. He'll later become chairman of the Federal Reserve, bringing some version of Rand's ideas about free markets into the halls of American power. Joan Mitchell, who will marry Greenspan, Mary Ann, and Charles Sears. The group grows to about a dozen core members. They read manuscripts, they discuss philosophy, they debate applications of objectivist principles, to specific situations. Rand lectures, explains, corrects misunderstandings. She demands precision in thought and language. Sloppy thinking is moral treason. Contradictions are evil. You must be able to defend every position you hold with rigorous logic. The gatherings have an intensity that's hard to describe. These aren't casual social events. They're philosophical examinations. Rand can be merciless when she detects evasion or intellectual dishonesty. She'll pursue an argument for hours, demanding clarity, insisting on explicit premises, never letting anyone retreat into vague generalities. Some people find it exhilarating, others find it suffocating. Several attendees drop away, unable to handle the pressure or unwilling to accept the totality of Rand's system. She doesn't compromise. If you disagree with her on fundamentals, you're wrong, and she'll prove it. Meanwhile, she's writing again. Not fiction this time, but the book that will present her philosophy in full systematic form. She's calling it Atlas Shrugged. The project is enormous. She's been planning it since before the Fountainhead was published. She's accumulated thousands of pages of notes, outlines, character sketches, plot developments. She knows exactly what she wants to say and exactly how she wants to say it. The story takes place in a near-future America that's sliding into economic collapse. Government regulations strangle business. Producers are blamed for every social problem. Success is treated as exploitation. The competent are forced to support the incompetent. Society is suffocating under the weight of altruistic morality and collectivist politics. And then the productive people start disappearing. First one industrialist vanishes, then another, then inventors, artists, scientists, anyone of genuine ability. They're not dying or retiring, they're going somewhere, though no one knows where. The protagonist is Dagny Taggart, vice president of a transcontinental railroad. She's trying desperately to keep the trains running as the world falls apart around her. She's competent, rational, driven. She refuses to accept the moral code that says she should sacrifice herself for others. She loves her work, and she's good at it, and she won't apologize for either. Slowly she discovers what's happening. Someone is convincing the best minds to withdraw from society, to refuse to be sacrificial victims any longer. They're going on strike, not the workers, not the poor, not the disadvantaged, the creators, the thinkers, the people who make civilization possible. The man organising this strike is John Galt, a figure who's been mentioned mysteriously throughout the book. Who is John Galt, people ask, when something inexplicable happens? It's become a meaningless phrase, an expression of helpless resignation. But John Galt is real. He's a physicist who invented a revolutionary motor that could have transformed the world. When the company he worked for adopted a socialist compensation scheme, he destroyed his invention and walked out. He's been recruiting others ever since, persuading them to withdraw their talents from a world that doesn't value them. Dagny eventually joins them, not because she stops caring about her railroad, but because she realizes the strike is right. The producers have been carrying everyone else, receiving nothing but punishment in return. Only when they stop will people understand what they've lost. The book builds toward a climax where John Galt broadcasts a radio speech explaining the strike's philosophy. The speech is 60 pages long. It's Rand's complete statement of objectivism, delivered by her ideal man to a world that's destroying itself through its rejection of reason and individualism. She writes this massive novel while maintaining all her other activities. The Saturday night meetings continue. She corresponds with readers, writes articles, gives occasional lectures. Frank is there, always in the background, supportive but increasingly peripheral to her life. The relationship hasn't been romantic in any meaningful sense for years. They still live together, still present themselves as husband and wife, but the emotional centre of Rand's life is elsewhere. Nathan Blumenthal has become essential to her. He's not just a student or intellectual companion, He's become her closest collaborator, the person who understands her ideas most completely, who can discuss her work at the level she requires. He's 20 years younger. She's in her late 40s, but age is irrelevant. What matters is philosophical affinity, intellectual compatibility, shared values. Something shifts. The relationship becomes romantic. Rand falls in love with Nathan, or convinces herself she does. She believes this is rational, that her feelings follow logically from their intellectual connection. If he's her philosophical soulmate, shouldn't he be her romantic partner as well? She approaches both Frank and Barbara, Nathan's girlfriend. She explains the situation. She's in love with Nathan. Nathan is in love with her. This is rational self-interest. Everyone should accept it. They can maintain their marriages while Ayn and Nathan pursue their relationship. It's all perfectly logical, if you think about it clearly. Frank says nothing. He's never argued with Ayn about anything important. He won't start now. Barbara, after initial shock, agrees. She's devoted to Objectivism, to Rand, to the entire intellectual project. If this is what rationality requires, she'll accept it. Nathan himself goes along. How could he refuse? He's 24 years old, being pursued by the woman whose ideas have shaped his entire worldview. He's flattered, overwhelmed, trapped. He tells himself he wants this. The affair continues for years. Rand is writing Atlas Shrugged, conducting her relationship with Nathan, running the collective, all simultaneously. The novel grows longer and longer. She refuses to cut anything. Every scene is necessary, every speech essential to the philosophical argument she's making. Publishers are skeptical. The Fountainhead was successful, but this new book is even longer, even more philosophical, even less likely to appeal to general readers. Random House finally agrees to publish it. Bennett Cerf, the publisher, doesn't share Rand's politics, but he respects her talent and believes the book will find an audience. Atlas Shrugged is published in October 1957. It's 1,168 pages long. The first printing is 100,000 copies. The book is dedicated to both Frank O'Connor and Nathan Blumenthal, now Nathan Branden, after legally changing his name. The critical reception is savage. Reviewers across the political spectrum attack it. Conservatives hate its atheism and its challenge to religious morality. Liberals hate its defense of capitalism and rejection of altruism. Literary critics find it crude, its characters cardboard, its prose workmanlike at best. Whittaker Chambers, writing in the National Review, calls it sophomoric and detects something like a voice commanding readers to the gas chambers. The comparison to totalitarianism infuriates Rand. She's written a book defending individual freedom, and it's being compared to fascism. But readers respond differently. Sales are strong from the beginning. Within weeks, Atlas Shrugged is a bestseller. People buy it, read it, recommend it to friends. Many have the same reaction they had to The Fountainhead, only more intense. The book changes how they see the world. Rand receives thousands of letters. Young people especially are drawn to her radical individualism, her defense of self-interest, her rejection of guilt. The 1950s have been a decade of conformity, of social pressure to fit in, of suspicion toward anyone who stands out. Atlas Shrugged tells them it's right to be different, right to pursue your own goals, right to refuse sacrifice. The book keeps selling. Year after year, decade after decade, it finds new readers. It never goes out of print. Sales eventually exceed 7 million copies. Only the Bible sells more consistently among serious books. Rand has achieved everything she set out to do. She's written the novel she planned since childhood, the complete statement of her philosophy in dramatic form. She's created a following of dedicated students. She's become a significant cultural force, someone whose ideas will be debated and analysed for generations. But the triumph is about to unravel. The same intensity that built her success, the same uncompromising certainty that made her philosophy compelling will destroy the community she's created. The collective is about to tear itself apart. The affair between Ayn Rand and Nathan Branden continues in secret. 4 people know: Rand, Nathan, Frank O'Connor, and Barbara Branden. Everyone else in the collective remains in the dark. The arrangement is absurd, unsustainable, built on layers of rationalization that would collapse under honest examination. But honesty is not what's happening here. What's happening is elaborate performance. Frank drinks more. He sits in the apartment while Rand and Nathan disappear into the bedroom for their scheduled sessions. He's given up painting years ago. He rarely speaks at collective meetings. When he does talk, his comments are so brief, so careful, that people stop listening. He's become furniture in his own life. Barbara throws herself into the Nathaniel Branden Institute, the organization they've created to teach Objectivism through formal courses. She writes lectures, manages logistics, deals with the growing number of students. She tells herself the work matters, that spreading Rand's ideas justifies everything. At night, she lies awake knowing her husband is with another woman and that she's supposed to accept this as rational. The collective meets regularly. The inner circle now includes Alan Greenspan, a tall, quiet economist who will one day chair the Federal Reserve. He rarely speaks but listens intently, absorbing Rand's ideas about capitalism and freedom. Leonard Peikoff, a young philosophy student who treats every word Rand says as revelation. Joan Mitchell, Alan Blumenthal's wife, a painter who struggles with Rand's dismissal of abstract art. The group discusses philosophy, debates fine points of objectivist theory, and operates under rules that no one fully articulates, but everyone understands. You cannot disagree with Rand fundamentally. Minor questions are acceptable. Clarifications are welcome. But challenge a core premise and you're attacking reason itself. Several people learn this the hard way. One by one, members of the collective fall from grace. The pattern is always similar. Someone expresses doubt about an aspect of objectivism. Rand responds not with argument, but with moral condemnation. The person isn't merely wrong. They're irrational. They're betraying their own mind. They're choosing whim over logic. The accused usually tries to defend themselves, to explain their reasoning. This makes things worse. The fact that they'll persist in error proves their corruption. Eventually, they're expelled, cut off completely. Rand instructs remaining members to sever all contact. These aren't simply disagreements, they're excommunications. The most painful break involves the Brandens' closest friends, a couple who've been part of the circle from the beginning. They commit the sin of falling in love with people Rand considers inappropriate. The man is interested in a woman Rand finds intellectually inferior. The woman is attracted to a man Rand deems irrational. Both relationships are forbidden. When the couple refuses to end their romantic connections, they're expelled. The Brandens, following Rand's orders, cut them off entirely. Years of friendship end overnight. This should be a warning. Nathan and Barbara see what happens to people who deviate from Rand's prescriptions. They see the absolute nature of her judgments, the speed with which devotion turns to condemnation. They keep their doubts hidden. By the early 1960s, the Nathaniel Branden Institute is thriving. Courses are offered in New York, Los Angeles, and other cities. Thousands of students pay to study Objectivism through recorded lectures, written materials, and local discussion groups. Nathan is the primary lecturer, second only to Rand herself in authority. He's become a public figure, sought after for speeches and interviews. The money is substantial. The institute generates income that makes Nathan and Barbara financially independent. They move to a larger apartment. They socialize with successful people drawn to objectivist ideas. On the surface, everything looks perfect. Nathan is 29 years old. He spent nearly 15 years as Rand's student, then her designated intellectual heir, then her lover. His entire adult identity has been constructed in relation to her. But something is shifting. He's starting to feel trapped. The affair that once seemed like the ultimate validation now feels like an obligation. Rand is 60 years old. Nathan finds himself less attracted to her, less excited by their encounters. He doesn't admit this to himself clearly. That would be irrational, but the feeling is there. He starts noticing other women, younger women, students at the institute, women his own age. This shouldn't be happening. According to Objectivist theory, he's chosen Rand as his highest value. His sexual response should follow automatically from his conscious judgment. The fact that it doesn't terrifies him. Rand notices. Her antennae for emotional withdrawal are finely tuned. She begins questioning Nathan about his feelings, demanding explanations for any perceived distance. He reassures her, manufactures excuses, performs passion he no longer fully feels. The relationship becomes increasingly theatrical. In 1964, a young woman named Patricia Scott appears at the Nathaniel Branden Institute. She's 23, an aspiring model and actress, beautiful in a way that stops conversation. She has no particular interest in philosophy. A friend dragged her to a lecture, but Nathan notices her immediately. He begins an affair with Patricia. It's secret from everyone, including Barbara, especially including Rand. This is the ultimate betrayal of objectivist principles. Rand has taught that honesty is absolute, that deception is evil, that one must never fake reality. Nathan is now faking reality constantly. He maintains the scheduled sessions with Rand. He performs the intellectual partnership, the romantic connection, the validation of her as his supreme value. He continues teaching objectivism with absolute certainty, and he conducts a hidden relationship that violates everything he claims to believe. The lying becomes elaborate. He invents reasons why the affair with Rand needs to become less frequent. He claims psychological blocks, temporary difficulties, issues he's working through. Rand is suspicious but wants to believe him. She's invested everything in this relationship. Admitting it's failing would mean admitting her philosophy doesn't work, that you can't actually choose your emotions through reason. Barbara discovers the affair with Patricia. Nathan confesses, begs her not to tell Rand. Barbara is devastated, but agrees. She's trapped in the same web of deception. The marriage becomes a shell, maintained for appearances while both partners conduct their separate lives. Years pass. Nathan continues the charade. He's 35 now, still meeting with Rand, still running the institute, still pretending everything is fine. The strain is destroying him. He's having panic attacks, insomnia, periods of depression, but he can't find a way out. Ending the affair with Rand means losing everything. His career, his income, his entire identity are built on being her chosen successor. Rand is increasingly difficult. She's 70 years old, dealing with Frank's alcoholism, frustrated that Atlas Shrugged hasn't transformed the culture as she expected. She's working on essays, giving occasional talks, but the great creative work is behind her. The relationship with Nathan is one of the few things that still makes her feel alive. She clings to it desperately. By 1968, the situation is untenable. Nathan has been lying for 4 years. He's in love with Patricia, wants to build a life with her, but can't admit this to Rand without destroying everything. He tries to gradually distance himself, claiming he needs time to work through his psychological issues. Rand demands they resume their relationship immediately. She's done being patient. The confrontation happens in August. Rand insists that Nathan come to the apartment for a serious conversation. He arrives knowing this might be the end. They sit in the living room where the collective used to gather. Rand asks him directly whether there's another woman. Nathan hesitates. In that hesitation, she sees the truth. The explosion is total. Rand screams at him for hours. He's betrayed everything. Betrayed her, betrayed reason itself. She demands to know who the woman is. Nathan, in his final act of cowardice, refuses to say. He'll admit the affair, but won't name Patricia. This makes everything worse. Rand tells him to leave. She never wants to see him again. Nathan is expelled from Objectivism, from the institute he built, from the movement that's been his entire adult life. Rand announces his excommunication in an article titled "To Whom It May Concern," published in the Objectivist newsletter. She accuses him of financial exploitation, of psychological manipulation, of moral corruption. She doesn't mention the affair. That would reveal too much about her own choices. Instead, she frames his betrayal in terms acceptable to her public image. The Objectivist movement splits. Some students side with Nathan, believing Rand's condemnation is too harsh. Most side with Rand, accepting her judgment as they've been trained to do. The Nathaniel Branden Institute closes. Barbara and Nathan divorce. The collective dissolves. People who've been friends for years stop speaking to each other. Rand retreats further into her apartment. Frank is still there, drinking, barely present. She continues writing essays, giving occasional interviews, defending her philosophy against all critics. But the inner circle is gone. The intellectual community she built has shattered. She's surrounded by new, younger followers who never knew the original group, who see her only as the author of Atlas Shrugged, the voice of reason in an irrational world. The break with Nathan devastates her. She's lost not just a lover, but the person she designated as her intellectual heir, the one who was supposed to carry Objectivism forward after her death. She's 73 years old. Atlas Shrugged is 11 years in the past. The Fountainhead is 25. Her creative work is finished. All that remains is the philosophy and the struggle to maintain its purity. Alan Greenspan remains loyal. Leonard Peikoff becomes the new designated heir, the authorized interpreter of Objectivism. He's different from Nathan, less charismatic, more rigid, but absolutely devoted. He'll spend the rest of his life explaining and defending every word Rand wrote. The 1970s are difficult years. Rand's health declines. She's diagnosed with lung cancer, a bitter irony for someone who dismissed all warnings about smoking as irrational fear-mongering. She undergoes surgery. The cancer goes into remission, but she's weakened, exhausted, forced to confront mortality. Frank deteriorates faster. The alcohol has destroyed him. He barely recognizes people sometimes. Rand arranges for care, but she's lost the husband she married in 1929, the man whose face launched her American life. He dies in November 1979. Rand is 74. They'd been married 50 years. She lives 3 more years, increasingly isolated, occasionally giving interviews, working on essays she'll never finish. The apartment on East 34th Street becomes her entire world. She rarely goes out. The woman who wrote about heroes conquering existence spends her final years in a few rooms, surrounded by memories of battles won and lost. The movement continues without her full participation. Books are published, institutes are founded. Her ideas spread through libertarian politics, through business schools, through the rhetoric of capitalism and individual rights. But Rand herself is fading, becoming more legend than person. She dies on March 6, 1982, at the age of 77. The cause is heart failure. She's alone when it happens except for a nurse. No dramatic final words, no philosophical statement, just the quiet end of a life that began in St. Petersburg 82 years earlier. The funeral is held at Frank E. Campbell Chapel in Manhattan. The casket is flanked by a $6 sign made of flowers. It's the symbol from Atlas Shrugged, the mark of the strikers, the representation of money as the tool of free exchange between rational minds. Several hundred people attend. Alan Greenspan is there. Leonard Peikoff delivers the eulogy. Barbara Branden comes, paying respects to the woman who shaped her life and nearly destroyed it. Nathan does not attend. The body is buried next to Frank in Kensico Cemetery in Valhalla, New York. The headstone reads simply, Ayn Rand O'Connor, 1905 to 1982. The woman who rejected her birth name, who invented herself completely, who built a philosophy around the supremacy of reason and the glory of human achievement, lies under a marker that includes the married name she kept but rarely used. The obituaries are respectful but divided. The New York Times calls her a Russian-born novelist and philosopher who preached a philosophy of rational self-interest and laissez-faire capitalism. The word preached is telling. Even in death, she's not quite granted the status of serious philosopher. She's a preacher, an evangelist, someone who believed too intensely to be properly intellectual. Her followers see it differently. To them, she's the greatest thinker of the 20th century, the woman who solved the fundamental problems of philosophy that had plagued humanity since Plato. Her enemies, and she had many, see her death as the end of a dangerous cult. The final chapter of a movement built on arrogance and oversimplification. But here's what actually happens after she dies. The philosophy doesn't fade, it grows. The Ayn Rand Institute is founded in 1985, 3 years after her death. It's dedicated to promoting objectivism, exactly as Rand defined it, with no deviations, no updates, no compromises. Leonard Peikoff leads it initially, the designated heir fulfilling his role. The Institute sponsors essay contests for high school students. It distributes free copies of Atlas Shrugged and the Fountainhead to schools. It trains speakers, publishes books, maintains websites, defends Rand's reputation against all critics. Another organisation forms, the Atlas Society, originally called the Institute for Objectivist Studies. This one takes a different approach, more open to interpretation, more willing to engage with academic philosophy, less rigid about doctrinal purity. The two organisations don't get along. The split mirrors the old break between Rand and the Brandens. It's about who owns the philosophy, who gets to interpret it, who can change it, and who must preserve it exactly as written. Both organisations thrive. Objectivism splits into factions, develops schisms, generates debates about what Rand really meant. The philosophy she intended to be a complete, closed system becomes something messier, more alive, more subject to the very human disagreements she tried to eliminate through pure reason. The books keep selling. Atlas Shrugged never goes out of print. Every few years, sales spike during economic crises or political debates about government power. After the 2008 financial collapse, Atlas Shrugged sales increase by 300%. Politicians reference it, economists cite it, business leaders call it their favourite book. Paul Ryan, who becomes Speaker of the House, says Atlas Shrugged was the book that most influenced his life. He gives copies to his staff. He talks about Rand in interviews, though he later distances himself when her atheism becomes politically inconvenient. This happens often. Politicians embrace her economics, but reject her atheism. Business leaders love her defense of capitalism, but ignore her criticism of religion. Conservatives claim her, but she despised conservatives. Libertarians adopt her, but she rejected the libertarian label. Everyone takes pieces. No one takes the whole. Alan Greenspan becomes chairman of the Federal Reserve in 1987. He serves for 19 years, presiding over American economic policy through multiple administrations. The man who attended objectivist meetings in Rand's apartment, who contributed essays to her newsletters, who absorbed her philosophy of laissez-faire capitalism, now controls the levers of government economic intervention. The contradiction is obvious. Rand would have been horrified. The Federal Reserve was exactly the kind of government manipulation of the economy she opposed. But Greenspan justifies his position through elaborate reasoning about working within the system to promote freedom. It's the kind of rationalization she would have demolished in 30 seconds. The 2008 financial crisis happens on his watch. Critics blame the deregulation he championed. the faith in rational self-interest that led banks to take catastrophic risks. In congressional testimony, Greenspan admits he found a flaw in his ideology, that he was shocked markets didn't self-regulate as expected. This becomes ammunition for Rand's critics. See, they say, her philosophy fails in practice. It assumes perfect rationality that doesn't exist. It ignores systemic risks. It leads to disaster when implemented. Her defenders respond that Greenspan betrayed the philosophy by working in government at all, that he compromised objectivism by trying to apply it through state power, that the crisis proved government intervention fails, not that free markets fail. The debate continues. It will always continue. Barbara Branden publishes her biography, The Passion of Ayn Rand, in 1986. It's honest, detailed, based on decades of intimate knowledge. It describes Rand's brilliance and her cruelty, her achievements and her contradictions. It reveals the affair with Nathan, the psychological abuse of followers, the increasingly dictatorial control of the movement. The Ayn Rand Institute denounces it as a betrayal. Leonard Peikoff writes that Barbara is lying, distorting, trying to destroy Rand's reputation. Some followers refuse to read it. Others read it and experience cognitive dissonance. The woman in the book doesn't match the rational ideal they'd imagined, but the book humanizes Rand in ways her own writing never did. Readers see the immigrant girl who became a philosopher. They see the struggles, the fears, the very human needs for love and recognition that drove someone who claimed reason was everything. Some readers turn away, others become more interested. Nathan Branden publishes his own memoir, Judgment Day, in 1989. It's more personal, more focused on his relationship with Rand and his own psychological development. He's become a therapist, specializing in self-esteem, writing popular psychology books that have nothing to do with objectivism. He's built a successful career, completely separate from Rand, but he keeps circling back, trying to understand what happened, trying to explain to himself and others how he spent 18 years in her orbit. The memoirs create a second wave of interest in Rand. People who never read the philosophy books read the biographies. They're fascinated by the cult aspects, the affair, the excommunications. It's a compelling story even if you disagree with every word she wrote. Academic philosophers mostly ignore her. She's not taught in university philosophy departments, except occasionally as an example of popular philosophy or 20th century intellectual history. The reasons are complex, but some are simple. She didn't engage with the philosophical literature. She didn't write for academic journals. She didn't build arguments in the way professional philosophers recognize as legitimate. She claimed she was the only important philosopher since Aristotle. She dismissed Kant, Hume, and the entire Western philosophical tradition as corrupt mysticism. Professional philosophers responded by dismissing her. The mutual disdain was complete. But political philosophy departments teach her. Economics departments mention her. Business schools assign her novels. She occupies a strange space, influential but not respectable, widely read but academically marginalized. Her influence on American politics is undeniable. The modern libertarian movement draws heavily from her ideas, even when they reject the objectivist label. The Tea Party movement in 2009 carries signs referencing Atlas Shrugged. Politicians talk about makers and takers, producers and moochers, the creative minority and the parasitic majority. These are Randian concepts, Randian language, Randian moral categories. They've entered political discourse so thoroughly that people use them without knowing the source. The religious right has a complicated relationship with her. They love her defense of capitalism and individual freedom. They hate her atheism and her sexual ethics. They try to separate the economics from the metaphysics, taking what serves them and discarding what doesn't. Rand would have called this the exact kind of intellectual dishonesty she spent her life fighting. You can't pick and choose. The philosophy is integrated. You take it whole, or not at all. But people do pick and choose. They always have. They always will. Silicon Valley embraces her. Tech entrepreneurs see themselves in her heroes. The innovators fighting against bureaucratic mediocrity. The geniuses who owe nothing to society and deserve everything they create. The language of disruption, of creative destruction, of building the future against the resistance of the past. All of this echoes Randian themes. Some make the connection explicit, others absorb it through the culture without reading a word she wrote. The mythology of the lone genius, the founder as hero, the company as achievement of pure will. This is Rorkean and Riordan-like, even when Rand's name never appears. Critics point out the irony. Many tech companies depend on government contracts, government-funded research, government-built infrastructure. The internet itself emerged from government projects. The lone genius narrative ignores the vast collaborative networks that enable innovation. But mythology is more powerful than history. The story people tell themselves matters more than the messy reality. Rand understood this. She built her philosophy around heroic narratives, not economic papers. She wrote novels, not treatises, because she knew stories change minds in ways arguments cannot. Her personal life remains controversial. The affair with Nathan Branden is analysed and reanalysed. Some see it as hypocrisy, a betrayal of Frank, proof that she couldn't live by her own rational standards. Others see it as consistent with her beliefs, a pursuit of the highest values regardless of conventional morality. The way she treated followers is harder to defend. The loyalty oaths, the excommunications, the psychological manipulation, the demand for total agreement on every topic from metaphysics to music. This looks like cult behaviour, like the exact kind of authoritarian control she claimed to oppose. Her defenders argue she was protecting her philosophy from distortion, maintaining intellectual integrity, refusing to let others water down ideas that took her lifetime to develop. You don't compromise truth. You don't tolerate error. You don't pretend disagreement is acceptable when you know you're right. Her critics say this is rationalized cruelty, that treating people as abstractions rather than humans with feelings and needs led to real damage. That many who left the movement needed therapy to recover from the psychological abuse. Both things are probably true. She was brilliant and cruel. She was right about some things and catastrophically wrong about others. She helped people and harmed people, sometimes the same people at different times. The feminist question never resolves. Some women see her as a pioneer, a female author who succeeded in a male-dominated field, who created strong female characters, who insisted women were rational beings capable of achievement equal to men. They point to Dominique and Dagny as examples of female agency and power. Others see her as deeply anti-feminist, someone who rejected solidarity among women, who blamed victims, who defined femininity in ways that served male fantasy, who reserved her greatest contempt for other women and elevated men as the proper objects of worship. Rand would have rejected both interpretations. She didn't think in terms of group identity. She thought in terms of individuals. The fact that Dagny was a woman was incidental. What mattered was that she was rational, productive, worthy. But fiction doesn't work that way. Readers bring their own context. They see patterns the author didn't intend. They find meanings in the gaps and silences. Dagny runs a railroad, but she's still primarily defined by her relationships with men. Dominique is brilliant, but she's mostly ornamental. The female characters are strong, but they're still written through a male gaze. This matters to some readers and doesn't matter to others. It's another piece people take or leave based on what serves their purposes. The colleges still assign her. Freshman composition classes use the Fountainhead. Political science surveys include Atlas Shrugged. Students read her, argue about her, write papers supporting or attacking her ideas. Some become converts, others become critics. Most just complete the assignment and move on. But every year, A few students have the experience of reading Rand for the first time and feeling like they've discovered truth. The world suddenly makes sense. All the confusion about morality and politics and existence resolves into clear principles. They've found answers. This is what Rand wanted. This is what she wrote for. Not academic respect or literary prizes, but direct impact on individual minds. She wanted to change how people think, how they see themselves, how they live. She succeeded more than most philosophers ever do. Millions of people have read her books. Thousands consider themselves objectivists. Her ideas circulate through culture in ways that don't require anyone to know her name. When Ayn Rand died on March 6, 1982, she was cremated and her ashes were placed beside a 6-foot-tall floral arrangement in the shape of a dollar sign. This was not irony. This was not a joke made by critics. This was arranged by her followers as a tribute. The woman who had written thousands of pages about rational philosophy, about the virtue of selfishness, about man as a heroic being, ended her physical existence next to a giant flower dollar sign. It's the perfect symbol of everything complicated about her legacy. Was it sincere tribute or unintentional parody? Was it honouring her values or reducing them to kitsch? Yes. The funeral was held at the Frankie Campbell Funeral Chapel in Manhattan, the same place that had hosted services for Rudolph Valentino and Judy Garland. Several hundred people attended. Alan Greenspan was there. He would go on to chair the Federal Reserve for nearly 2 decades, applying economic theories influenced by the woman in the casket. Leonard Peikoff gave the eulogy. He called her the greatest human being who ever lived. Some in attendance believed this absolutely. Others found it grotesque. Outside, the world kept turning, mostly unaware. The New York Times ran an obituary. A few papers noted her passing, but there was no national day of mourning, no flags at half-mast. She died the way most writers die, known to some, forgotten by many, leaving behind books that would have to speak for themselves. And they did speak. They kept speaking. Sales of her novels actually increased after her death. Atlas Shrugged sold more copies in the decades following 1982 than it had in many of the years when she was alive. Every recession brought a spike in sales. Every political crisis sent people back to her books. The 2008 financial collapse made Atlas Shrugged a bestseller again, climbing near the top of Amazon's rankings as people tried to understand what had happened to the economy. Tea Party rallies in 2009 featured protesters holding signs reading, "Who is John Galt?" These weren't readers doing academic analysis. These were people who felt the book explained their anger, their sense that something fundamental had broken in America. They were reading Atlas Shrugged as prophecy, as warning, as instruction manual. Rand would have enjoyed this and been frustrated by it. She wanted influence, but she also wanted to be understood correctly. She insisted there was a right way to interpret her work, and a wrong way. The people waving her quotes at rallies weren't necessarily reading carefully. They were using her as ammunition. But ammunition was what they needed, and she provided it. The libertarian movement claimed her fully after her death. The Libertarian Party itself had formed in 1971, and while Rand had refused to endorse it, calling it a group of hippies and draft dodgers, her ideas became central to libertarian thought. Free markets, individual rights, minimal government, the non-aggression principle. All of this traces back through various thinkers, but Rand gave it narrative power. She made these abstractions into stories. The Cato Institute, founded in 1977, promotes ideas that align with objectivism even when they don't use that label. The Reason Foundation does similar work. The Institute for Humane Studies runs programs introducing students to classical liberal ideas, including Rand's philosophy. None of these organizations are officially objectivist. Most of them would note disagreements with Rand on specific points. But the ecosystem of free market think tanks and advocacy groups that shapes American policy debates owes something to the woman who wrote about Galt's Gulch. The Ayn Rand Institute, established in 1985 by Leonard Peikoff, became the official keeper of the flame. It promotes objectivism through educational programs, essay contests for students, and free book distributions. Over the years, it has given away millions of copies of Rand's novels to high school and college students. The essay contests offer substantial prizes. Students read the Fountainhead, or Atlas Shrugged, write about the themes, compete for scholarships. Some of them become committed objectivists. Most just write the essay, but exposure matters. Getting teenagers to read 1,200 pages of philosophical fiction is an achievement regardless of what they conclude. A rival organisation emerged in 1990. David Kelly, who had been associated with the Ayn Rand Institute, broke away over disagreements about how open objectivism should be to dialogue with other philosophies. Peikoff and the ARI maintained Rand's position that objectivism was a closed system, that you either accepted all of it or you weren't an objectivist. Kelly wanted something more flexible, more willing to engage with other traditions. He founded what eventually became the Atlas Society. The split was bitter, involving excommunications and public denunciations, exactly the kind of sectarian warfare Rand had practiced during her lifetime. Her followers had learned well. The irony is that both organisations are promoting the same basic texts, the same novels, the same core ideas, but they cannot cooperate because cooperation would require compromise, and compromise is surrender. This is what happens when you build a philosophy around the principle that you must never sacrifice your values. Every disagreement becomes existential. Every difference becomes betrayal. You end up with competing objectivist organisations that consider each other corrupt. Meanwhile, the books keep selling. They don't care about organisational disputes. People discover the Fountainhead in a used bookstore, or someone hands them Atlas Shrugged, or they see it referenced in something else they're reading. They open the cover, they start reading. Some bounce off immediately, put off by the writing style, or the length or the preachiness. Others get hooked. The narrative pulls them forward, even when the philosophy slows things down. They want to know what happens to Dagny, to Hank, to Galt. They keep turning pages. By the time they finish, they've absorbed thousands of pages of argument embedded in story. This was always Rand's strategy. Don't write treatises, write novels. Don't give people homework. Give them characters they care about. Make them feel something and then explain why they're feeling it. Show them the world you want them to see and make it vivid enough that they can't forget it. The modern American right wing is unthinkable without her. Not because everyone on the right has read her, most haven't, but because her ideas circulate through the ecosystem. The notion that taxation is theft, that regulation is tyranny, that business leaders are heroes, that self-interest is virtue, that government is inherently destructive. You hear these ideas from politicians who may never have opened Atlas Shrugged, but who are speaking in a tradition she helped create. Paul Ryan, who served as Speaker of the House, gave copies of Atlas Shrugged to his staff as Christmas presents. He called Rand the reason I got into public service. He later downplayed this connection, perhaps because being too closely associated with an atheist philosopher creates problems in Republican politics. But the influence was real. Rand Paul, a senator from Kentucky. Ki is literally named after her. His father, Ron Paul, the libertarian congressman, promoted her books and her ideas for decades. These aren't fringe figures. These are people who shaped policy, who voted on legislation, who influenced how millions of Americans think about government. The fact that Rand's philosophy leads to positions like eliminating Social Security and Medicare, programs that kept her alive in her final years, doesn't seem to bother anyone. Hypocrisy is less interesting than impact. She changed the conversation. On the left, she's mostly a figure of contempt. Liberals and progressives see Randian philosophy as a justification for cruelty, a way to moralize selfishness, a defense of inequality. They point out that her heroes are industrialists and her villains are the poor, that her books celebrate wealth and denigrate need, that her vision of the good society is one where the strong thrive and the weak suffer. This is not unfair criticism. Rand did believe that inequality is natural and just, that some people are simply better than others, that attempting to create equality through redistribution is both immoral and destructive. She said this explicitly and repeatedly. Her defenders argue she's been caricatured, that critics focus on her most provocative statements while ignoring the nuance in her work. What nuance? The books are pretty clear. John Galt stops the motor of the world and lets people starve. Rourke destroys a housing project. Dominique testifies against the man she loves to make a philosophical point. These aren't subtle moments. These are the dramatic peaks of the narratives. Academic philosophers still don't take her seriously. You can get a PhD in philosophy without ever encountering her work in a seminar. She's not taught alongside Kant or Mill or Rawls. She's not part of the canon. This bothers her followers immensely. They see it as proof that academia is corrupt, that professional philosophers are intimidated by her originality, that the establishment excludes her because she threatens their comfortable assumptions. Or maybe she's just not that good as a philosopher. Maybe her arguments don't hold up to scrutiny. Maybe the reason academic philosophers don't engage with objectivism is the same reason they don't engage with most popular philosophy. It's not rigorous enough. It doesn't address the serious objections. It assumes too much and proves too little. Both explanations exist simultaneously. Some academics dismiss her for bad reasons, and some dismiss her for good reasons. The result is the same. She remains outside the mainstream of professional philosophy, but inside the mainstream of American culture. More people have read Atlas Shrugged than have read any work by any academic philosopher of the 20th century. More people can quote Howard Rourke than can explain Rawls's difference principle. This isn't a measure of quality. Popularity proves nothing about truth, but it proves something about influence. Rand wanted to change the world, and she did. Just not in the way she imagined. She thought she was creating a philosophy that would replace religion and reshape civilization. What she actually created was a set of narratives and slogans that certain kinds of people find useful. She gave articulate form to instincts that already existed. The person who resents taxation didn't learn that resentment from Rand, but Rand gave them a story where their resentment was heroic. The person who sees business as noble didn't get that from a novel. But the novel confirmed what they wanted to believe. This is how ideas work in practice. They don't convert people from scratch. They organize existing impulses. They provide vocabulary. They offer permission. Rand gave millions of people permission to believe that their self-interest was not just acceptable, but virtuous, that they didn't owe the world anything, that their success was their own, and their struggles were someone else's fault. This is appealing. This is seductive. This is why the books keep selling. The question that haunts every discussion of Rand is whether she was right. Not about everything. Nobody is right about everything, but about the central claims. Is selfishness a virtue? Are individual rights absolute? Is capitalism the only moral system? Should we admire the strong and dismiss the weak? These questions don't have simple answers. They're not settled by pointing to her personal failures or her literary limitations. They require engaging with the actual arguments. Some of those arguments are stronger than others. The defense of individual rights against collective tyranny, that's solid ground. The critique of altruism as sacrifice, that's worth considering. The celebration of productive achievement that resonates with reality, but the absolute rejection of any obligation to others, the contempt for compassion, the equation of market success with moral worth. These are harder to defend. The world is more complicated than her books suggest. People are more complicated. Suffering is more complicated. You can acknowledge someone's genuine needs without becoming their slave. You can help others without destroying yourself. You can recognize that markets sometimes fail, that success sometimes reflects luck rather than merit, that the poor are not necessarily parasites. Rand couldn't admit this. Her system didn't allow for it. Once you accept that reality is more complex than your philosophy, the whole structure threatens to collapse. So she defended every position absolutely, attacked every objection mercilessly, refused every compromise entirely. This made her philosophy internally consistent but externally brittle. It works perfectly as long as you accept all the premises. The moment you question one, the rest become questionable. This is why people either love her or hate her. There's no moderate position. You can't be sort of an objectivist the way you can be sort of a utilitarian. You're in or you're out. And that inflexibility is what ultimately limited her influence. She wanted to create a complete philosophical system that would replace everything that came before. What she actually created was a useful corrective to certain excesses, a provocative challenge to certain assumptions, and a compelling narrative for a particular kind of person at a particular stage of development. Most people who read Rand seriously don't stay with her forever. They read her in their 20s, find her exciting and liberating, absorb some useful ideas about independence and self-respect, and then move on to more nuanced thinkers. This is the normal trajectory. The person who builds their entire worldview around objectivism at age 20 and still holds it unchanged at age 50 is rare, and usually not someone you want to be trapped with at a dinner party. This doesn't make Rand worthless. It makes her what she actually is, a gateway drug to serious thinking about individualism and capitalism. She's the first philosopher many people read who takes individualism seriously, who doesn't immediately dismiss self-interest as morally suspect, who celebrates achievement without apology. That's valuable. That can change someone's life. But it's not the end point. It's the beginning. The tragedy of Rand's later years was that she couldn't accept this role. She wanted disciples, not students. She wanted converts, not readers. She wanted people who would absorb everything she said and never question it. When they inevitably did question, she expelled them. The movement she built was designed to replicate her certainty, not to extend her insights. Frank O'Connor died in November of 1979. He was 82 years old, and he'd spent the last several years in declining health. The emphysema that had plagued him for years finally overwhelmed his system. Ayn was with him at the end, though by then their relationship had long since lost whatever passion it once held. They were companions more than lovers, bound together by decades of habit and mutual dependence. She had needed him to be the ideal man she'd imagined, and he'd needed her to stop asking him to be that. Neither got what they needed. After Frank's death, Rand's own decline accelerated. She was 74 years old. The lung cancer she'd ignored for months was spreading. She continued smoking, continued working, continued insisting that reality would conform to her will. It didn't. In early 1982, she underwent surgery to remove part of one lung. The operation was successful, but the recovery was brutal. For the first time in her life, Ayn Rand was forced to accept limitations. Her body wouldn't obey. Her energy was gone. The mind that had produced millions of words now struggled to complete sentences. She spent her final months in her apartment, cared for by nurses and the few remaining members of her inner circle. Leonard Peikoff was there, still loyal, still believing, but most of the others were gone. Nathaniel Branden was living in California, writing books about self-esteem and romantic relationships. Barbara Branden was working on a biography that would reveal the private woman behind the public philosophy. Alan Greenspan was in Washington, serving as an economic advisor. His objectivist phase a distant memory, the movement Rand had built was fragmenting. Without her force of personality to hold it together, the contradictions became obvious. Some followers emphasized the political implications, pushing for radical libertarianism. Others focused on the epistemology, trying to develop objectivism as a serious academic philosophy. Still others treated it as a kind of secular religion, complete with rituals and orthodoxy. Rand had wanted unanimity. What she got was exactly what happens to every ideological movement after its founder dies: splintering and evolution, and endless arguments about what the founder really meant. On March 6, 1982, Ayn Rand died in her sleep. She was 77 years old. The official cause was heart failure, but really it was everything at once: the cancer, the smoking, the decades of pushing her body past its limits. The funeral was small, held at a Manhattan funeral home. Her open casket was flanked by a 6-foot dollar sign made of flowers, a final gesture that perfectly captured both her philosophy and its limitations. This was the symbol she'd chosen to represent human achievement, the mark of commercial exchange elevated to sacred status. To her followers, it was fitting. To everyone else, it looked exactly like what it was: the worship of a money dressed up as moral principle. The obituaries were respectful, but puzzled. The New York Times noted her influence, but questioned her philosophy. The intellectual establishment that had ignored her during her lifetime continued to ignore her after her death. The academic philosophers who might have engaged with her arguments dismissed her as a crank. The literary critics who might have praised her narrative skill were repelled by her ideas. She died as she had lived, celebrated by her followers and dismissed by almost everyone else. But dismissal isn't the same as irrelevance. In the decades since her death, Rand's influence has only grown. Not in philosophy departments, where objectivism remains a fringe position at best. Not in literary circles, where her novels are still considered crude propaganda. But in the culture at large, where her ideas about individualism, capitalism, and self-interest have become part of the ideological furniture. Every politician who claims that government is the problem, every CEO who insists that their wealth is entirely self-made, every person who argues that taxation is theft and regulation is tyranny, they're speaking Rand's language, even if they've never read her books. She lost the battle for academic respectability. She won something more important: the battle for popular consciousness. This is the paradox at the heart of Rand's legacy. The serious intellectuals rejected her. The people she wanted to convince, the philosophers, the cultural leaders, the shapers of elite opinion, they never took her seriously. But the ordinary people, the engineers and entrepreneurs, the business students and ambitious strivers, they read her books and found something powerful. They saw themselves in Howard Rourke and Dagny Taggart. They recognized their own frustrations in her villains. They felt permission to pursue their own interests without guilt. Was she right? The question persists because it can't be easily answered. On the narrow question of whether individuals have rights that shouldn't be violated, most people in liberal democracies would agree with her. On the broader question of whether self-interest is the only legitimate moral principle, most people would not. On the specific question of whether capitalism is the only moral system, the answer depends entirely on how you define capitalism and what alternatives you're considering. The problem with evaluating Rand is that she made everything a package deal. You couldn't accept her defense of individual rights without also accepting her contempt for altruism. You couldn't praise her celebration of achievement without endorsing her dismissal of suffering. You couldn't agree that markets are useful without claiming they're perfect. This all-or-nothing approach made her philosophy easy to summarize, but impossible to partially adopt. Real life requires compromise. It requires balancing competing values, acknowledging trade-offs, accepting that good people can disagree about important questions. Rand's system didn't allow for this. You were either with her completely or against her completely. This made for powerful fiction and rigid philosophy. It's why her novels still resonate, while her formal philosophy remains marginal. The books endure because they tap into something real. The frustration of talented people held back by mediocrity, that's real. The resentment of producers forced to carry non-producers, that exists. The anger at systems that punish success and reward failure, that's a genuine grievance. Rand gave voice to these feelings. She made them central rather than shameful. For many readers, especially young readers encountering these ideas for the first time, this is revelatory. But revelation isn't the same as truth. The feelings are real. The analysis of those feelings might be wrong. Yes, talented people are sometimes held back by mediocrity, but they're also sometimes lifted up by help they didn't earn. Yes, productive people carry some who don't produce, but they also benefit from infrastructure and stability they didn't create. Yes, systems sometimes punish success, but they also sometimes create the conditions that make success possible in the first place. Rand's genius was taking one side of these tensions and making it seem like the whole story. Her limitation was being unable to see that it wasn't. The self-made man is a myth. Everyone who succeeds does so partly through their own efforts and partly through advantages they inherited or were given. This doesn't negate individual achievement, it just contextualizes it. Rand couldn't accept context, she wanted absolutes. And absolutes are seductive. They're simple, they're clear, they remove doubt. This is why her books still sell, why her ideas still circulate, why politicians still quote her whether they've read her or not. She offered certainty in an uncertain world. She gave simple answers to complicated questions. She made selfishness sound noble and compassion sound weak. None of this makes her right, but it makes her influential. And influence is what she wanted. Not academic respectability, not literary prizes, not critical acclaim. She wanted to change how people think about themselves and their world. By that measure, she succeeded, not completely, not permanently, but more than most philosophers ever do. The woman who arrived in America with nothing, who taught herself a new language, who wrote her way from poverty to wealth, who created characters that millions of people still remember, who articulated a philosophy that shaped political movements and business cultures. She left a mark. It's a complicated mark. It's a controversial mark. But it's undeniable. Walk through any American city today and you'll see her legacy in the architecture of glass and steel that she celebrated, in the businesses that thrive on innovation and competition, in the individuals pursuing their own vision regardless of what others think. But you'll also see what she refused to acknowledge, the people who need help, the systems that prevent pure meritocracy, the ways that markets fail and communities matter and compassion isn't weakness. The full picture is messier than her novels suggest. Reality always is. The question isn't whether Rand was completely right. She wasn't. Nobody is. The question is whether engaging with her ideas helps you understand something important. For millions of readers, the answer has been yes. They found in her books a defense of ambition, a celebration of competence, a rejection of guilt that they needed to hear. Whether they stayed with her philosophy long term or moved beyond it, the encounter mattered. This is the measure of a thinker's importance, not whether they got everything right, but whether they changed the conversation. Rand changed the conversation. She made selfishness defensible, made capitalism moral, made individualism heroic. You can disagree with all of that and still recognize the impact. Before Rand, certain arguments were difficult to make in polite company. After Rand, they became part of mainstream political discourse. The woman born Elisa Rosenbaum in St. Petersburg in 1905 died as Ayn Rand in New York in 1982. In the 77 years between, she reinvented herself completely. She escaped revolution, learned a new language, created a new identity, wrote books that sold millions of copies, developed a philosophy that influenced millions of people, and built a movement that survived her death. She also alienated friends, destroyed relationships, refused to admit error, and created a system so rigid that it could only be accepted whole or rejected completely. Both things are true. She was brilliant and cruel, insightful and blind, revolutionary and reactionary. She saw things others missed and missed things everyone else saw. She changed minds and closed minds. She freed people from guilt and freed them from compassion. Her legacy is everything she wanted and nothing she expected. The novels remain, the philosophy fragments, the influence spreads, and the arguments continue. Ayn Rand wanted to be remembered as the philosopher who solved ethics, who made capitalism moral, who created a system to replace all previous systems. She'll be remembered as the novelist, who made individualism exciting, who gave voice to producer resentment, who articulated one side of eternal tension so powerfully that it can never again be ignored. That's not what she wanted, but it's more than most people get. The woman who worshipped heroes became one, flawed and human and unforgettable. The hardest question isn't whether Ayn Rand was right. It's why she still matters when so much of what she built has collapsed. The movement she created fractured. The relationships she valued destroyed themselves. The philosophy she claimed was complete keeps generating new interpretations she would have condemned as betrayals. And yet here we are, decades after her death, still arguing about her. Part of it is the books themselves. Whatever you think of her ideas, she knew how to tell stories that lodged in your brain. Howard Rourke standing trial, Dagny chasing a mystery, John Galt stopping the world. These images stick. You can disagree with every word she wrote and still remember the courtroom speech, still feel the pull of the strike, still see the vision of that hidden valley where the producers withdrew. Fiction does things that philosophy cannot. It makes abstract principles feel concrete. It gives you someone to root for, but it's more than craft. Rand tapped into something that doesn't go away, the resentment of being forced to carry others, the pride in your own work, the anger at systems that punish competence and reward failure. These aren't feelings she invented, they're part of human experience, especially the experience of capable people in bureaucratic systems. She gave those feelings a voice, made them central instead of shameful, built an entire moral framework around them. This is dangerous and necessary at the same time. Dangerous because it can slide into contempt for anyone who struggles, into worship of a success regardless of how it's achieved, into justification for cruelty dressed up as principle. Necessary because without it, you get the opposite problem. The talented person who feels guilty for being talented, the producer who apologizes for producing, the achiever who's taught that achievement itself is suspect. Most people eventually land somewhere between these extremes. They recognize that individual effort matters while also acknowledging that context matters. They see that self-interest drives progress while also understanding that pure self-interest destroys communities. They value both independence and interdependence, both achievement and compassion, both individual rights and collective responsibility. This is the mature position. This is wisdom. Rand never got there. She couldn't. Her system didn't allow for it. You were either rational or irrational, selfish or self-sacrificing, capitalist or collectivist. No middle ground, no synthesis, no acknowledgement that reality is complex enough to require multiple frameworks operating simultaneously. She built a philosophy designed for clarity, not accuracy. And this is why she's more useful as a corrective than as a complete system. Read her when you're drowning in guilt, when you've been taught that wanting things for yourself is evil, when you need permission to pursue your own life. She'll give you that permission. She'll remind you that your life belongs to you, that you don't owe the world your destruction, that achievement is honourable. Take that, use it, let it reshape how you see yourself. Then put her down and read something else. Read people who understand that markets fail, that luck matters, that some suffering is genuine and deserves response, that compassion isn't weakness. Read people who can hold complexity without collapsing into relativism. Build your own synthesis instead of accepting someone else's package deal. This is what most Rand readers actually do, whether they admit it or not. They take the pieces that serve them and discard the rest. The business leader who quotes her while also supporting his community. The politician who celebrates individual rights while also maintaining social programs. The reader who loves the novels but rejects the philosophy. Rand would have called this intellectual dishonesty. It's actually just being human. The woman herself remains fascinating precisely because she was so flawed. She preached rationality while making decisions driven by emotion. She celebrated independence while demanding absolute loyalty. She worshipped strength while being remarkably fragile. She built a philosophy around honesty while lying to herself and others. She claimed to value reality while constructing elaborate fantasies about her own importance. None of this negates her genuine insights. She understood things about motivation and incentives that many smarter thinkers missed. She saw clearly how systems that punish success eventually destroy themselves. She recognized that individual rights matter not just as political principles, but as prerequisites for human flourishing. She articulated these truths with unusual clarity and force. The fact that she also believed nonsense doesn't erase the things she got right. What's left 40 years after her death? Not the complete philosophical system she hoped to create. That fractured immediately and remains fractured today. Not the literary reputation she wanted. The novels are still dismissed by serious critics as propaganda with characters. Not the academic respectability she craved. Professional philosophers still don't take Objectivism seriously as a systematic philosophy. What's left is influence, diffuse, complicated, often unacknowledged influence, the language of makers and takers, the moral defense of self-interest, the suspicion of government, the celebration of entrepreneurship, the equation of success with virtue. These ideas circulate through American culture, shaping how millions of people think about economics and morality and the proper relationship between the individual and society. Some of that influence is good, some is destructive. All of it is real. The books keep selling. Every economic crisis brings new readers. Every political debate resurrects her arguments. Every ambitious teenager discovers her novels and feels that electric shock of recognition. She gave them permission to want things, to pursue their own vision, to reject guilt. Many will move beyond her eventually. Some won't. Either way, the encounter mattered. This is the paradox. She failed at almost everything she explicitly tried to do. She failed to create a lasting movement. She failed to convert the intellectual elite. She failed to maintain the relationships that mattered most to her. She failed to live by her own principles. And yet she succeeded in changing the conversation, in making certain arguments legitimate, in giving voice to a particular vision of human possibility. Was she right? About some things, yes. About others, catastrophically wrong. But right and wrong aren't the only measures that matter. Influential matters too. Memorable matters. Changed minds matter. By those standards, Ayn Rand was one of the most consequential thinkers of the 20th century, whether you think that's a good thing or not. The woman who fled communist Russia, carrying nothing but determination, became the philosopher of American capitalism. The girl who decided at 6 that she would be a writer, produced novels that millions still read. The immigrant who taught herself English created a prose style that's instantly recognizable. The person who claimed reason was everything demonstrated through her own life, that humans are more complicated than any system can capture. She wanted to be remembered as the philosopher who solved ethics. She'll be remembered as the novelist who made selfishness sound noble, who gave articulate form to producer resentment, who captured one side of eternal tensions with enough force that it can never again be dismissed. That's not what she wanted. but it's what she got. And it's more than most people achieve in a dozen lifetimes. The dollar sign at her funeral wasn't irony. It was inevitability. She'd spent decades making money sacred, turning commercial exchange into moral principle, elevating the pursuit of wealth into the highest human value. The symbol was fitting. It represented everything she believed and everything she missed. Money is a tool. It enables choice, rewards production, makes cooperation possible. But it's not the meaning of life. It's not the measure of a person. It's not the answer to the deepest questions. Rand couldn't see this because seeing it would have required acknowledging that her system was incomplete. And incompleteness was intolerable. Better to defend every position, absolutely. Attack every objection mercilessly. Refuse every compromise entirely. Better to be wrong consistently than right occasionally. Better to build a perfect system that doesn't work than an imperfect one that does. This is the final irony. The philosopher who worshipped reality spent much of her life denying it. The thinker who demanded rational consistency was driven by emotion she couldn't acknowledge. The woman who celebrated strength was remarkably weak in the ways that actually matter. Weak in her relationships, weak in her self-knowledge, weak in her ability to admit error or accept complexity. But weak people can still accomplish extraordinary things. Flawed thinkers can still generate valuable insights. Hypocrites can still articulate important truths. Rand did all of this. She built something that outlasted her despite its contradictions, that influenced millions despite its limitations, that changed the world despite being wrong about half of everything. The books remain on shelves. The arguments continue in comment sections. The influence spreads through political speeches and business seminars and late-night college dorm debates. Some of it is good influence, pushing back against excessive collectivism and defense of individual rights. Some of it is bad influence, justifying cruelty and dismissing suffering and elevating selfishness into virtue. Both things are true. They're always true. Ideas have consequences, and those consequences are complicated. The woman who wrote them was complicated. The world that received them was complicated. Nothing is simple except in fiction, and even Rand's fiction was less simple than she claimed. So what do we do with Ayn Rand? We take what's useful and discard what's not. We read her when we need reminding that individual achievement matters, that productivity is honourable, that you don't owe the world your destruction. We put her down when we need reminding that no one succeeds alone, that luck matters, that some obligations transcend self-interest. We treat her as one voice in a larger conversation, not the final word on anything. This is the reasonable approach. Rand would have hated it. She wanted totality, not balance. She wanted converts, not critics. She wanted disciples who would accept everything or reject everything. She didn't get what she wanted. None of us do. We get what we earn and what we're given and what random chance delivers. We get lives that are messier than novels, more complicated than philosophies, resistant to simple categories. Ayn Rand lived such a life, despite claiming otherwise. She achieved extraordinary things, despite being deeply flawed. She influenced millions despite being wrong about fundamentals. She matters despite failing at most of what she tried. This is the human condition. This is everyone's story, including hers. The woman who tried to escape humanity by making reason, everything ended up demonstrating that humans are more than their ideas, more than their systems, more than their certainties. She was right about some things. She was wrong about others. She changed the world, and the world changed her right back, accepting her influence while rejecting her totality, taking her seriously while refusing to take her completely, reading her books while ignoring half of what they said. This is how ideas work in practice. They're not adopted whole. They're digested, transformed, absorbed into larger systems that their creators never imagined. Ayn Rand is dead. Objectivism as she defined it, is dead. The movement she built is fractured beyond repair. But her influence lives on, spreading through culture in ways both visible and invisible, shaping arguments and assumptions, providing language and frameworks, changing minds in ways both good and bad. She wanted immortality through her ideas. She got something messier and more interesting. She got to be human after all.